Justice Rosalind Atkinson has told the jury to ignore anything they've seen, heard or read about this trial outside of the courtroom. It's been more than 10 years since Daniel Morcombe disappeared, but his abduction sparked the biggest missing person investigation in Australia's history and has attracted widespread publicity. Justice Atkinson has warned the jury to focus only on the evidence presented during the trial. She also reminded them that it was Brett Cowan's right not to give evidence, that the fact he didn't enter the witness box during the trial isn't an admission of guilt. The jury was also urged to be cautious when considering evidence from convicted sex offender Douglas Jackway, who Brett Cowan's defence team claims is responsible for Daniel's death. Yesterday, the defence gave a compelling argument as to why Brett Cowan should not be found guilty, arguing that he pretended to kill Daniel Morcombe in a bid to win the trust of a fake criminal gang set up by undercover police to lure him into their trap. Once Justice Atkinson finishes summing up this afternoon, the jury will retire to consider its verdict. Elizabeth Tilley, Sky News, Brisbane. The jury of 6 men and 6 women has listened very intently to the judge's summing up of this trial, sometimes making notes and often looking over at the defendant. Justice Rosalind Atkinson resumed her directions by delving into the elaborate undercover operation set up by covert police officers posing as members of a criminal gang. This operation spanned several months in 2011 and featured 24 fictitious scenarios, devised to produce a confession from Brett Peter Cowan. Eventually, they did, and Justice Atkinson told the jury that they must be satisfied in making their decision that the confessions they heard via video recordings were in fact made by Brett Cowan and were true. She also described the circumstances surrounding Brett Cowan's arrest and said that just because he decided to remain silent and not answer any questions did not make him guilty. When it comes to the 116 witnesses who have given evidence over the past 4 weeks, Justice Atkinson told the jury that this was trial by jury, not trial by expert, and that just because a witness may have been an expert in their field didn't mean the jury had to accept their evidence. The judge is expected to finish summing up this trial early this afternoon before the jury then retires to consider its verdict. Elizabeth Tilley, Sky News at Brisbane Supreme Court. The jury of 6 men and 6 women retired around lunchtime yesterday to consider its verdict, and after more than 3 hours of deliberations were sent home by Justice Rosalind Atkinson with instructions to reconvene here at 9:30 local time this morning. They have 19 days of evidence from 116 witnesses to consider, and they must return verdicts on 3 different charges. Those charges are murder, indecent dealing with a child, and interference with a dead human body. Brett Peter Cowan has pleaded not guilty to all 3 of those charges. The jury must be satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that he intentionally tried to kill Daniel Morcombe. And if not, they have been told they can consider a verdict of manslaughter. Justice Atkinson told the jury that they must consider their verdict and reach a unanimous decision based only on the evidence, that they must dismiss all feelings of sympathy or prejudice and not be swayed by public opinion. It was standing room only in the courtroom yesterday, packed with media, friends, supporters and homicide detectives involved in the lengthy investigation into Daniel's disappearance. But none are more anxious to hear this verdict than Bruce and Denise Morcombe, who have been here every single day of this trial. Elizabeth Tilley, Sky News at Brisbane Supreme Court. After 4 hours of deliberations, the jury in this trial is yet to deliver a verdict. At 12:15 Eastern Standard Time, the jury of 6 men and 6 women retired to consider the fate of Brett Peter Cowan. At 4:15, they were sent home with instructions to reconvene tomorrow morning. They have 19 days of evidence from 116 witnesses to consider, and they must return verdicts on 3 different charges. Those charges are murder, indecent dealing with a child, and interference with a dead human body. Brett Peter Cowan has pleaded not guilty to all 3 charges. The prosecution's case hinges on one key piece of evidence, and that's a secretly recorded confession by Brett Peter Cowan to Daniel Morcombe's murder. Justice Atkinson, in summing up today, told the jury that they must be satisfied when making their decision that the confession was made by Brett Cowan and that it was true. It was standing room only in the courtroom, packed with media, friends, supporters and homicide detectives involved in the lengthy investigation into Daniel Morcombe's disappearance. But none are more anxious to hear this verdict delivered than Bruce and Denise Morcombe. Elizabeth Tilley, Sky News at Brisbane Supreme Court. Queensland's top police officers have strenuously defended their handling of the investigation into Daniel Morcombe's murder as they face criticism over the methodologies used to catch the boy's killer. It comes amid reports that some members of the police force asked for the investigation to be taken off their hands and to be referred as a cold case in 2010. Queensland Police Commissioner Ian Stewart has confirmed that that request was made, but he said that it was never considered. Now, this investigation is unprecedented in the 150-year history of the Queensland Police Service. The scale of it was enormous, involving 15,000 pieces of information from Crime Stoppers that police had to meticulously sort through. Commissioner Stewart revealed today that there were many suspects in this case and more than one person who falsely claimed responsibility for Daniel's murder. But he says that they had to keep an open mind throughout the course of this investigation and explore all leads before them.
Certainly there will be those who will have different views about, what should have been followed up more quickly than something else, that yes, we should have taken out a warrant more early on a particular person or not. You have to put that in the context of the absolute complexity and flood of information that was just simply coming over the horizon at us in those early days.
Queensland Police has also revealed this investigation was conducted at a state, national and international level, and that the FBI was even consulted to help with a strategy of profiling child killers.
FBI are very experienced in investigating and profiling persons involved in child murders, and it gave us an opportunity to review our investigative strategies and to ensure that we were in line with best practice as used by the FBI.
So the Morcombes face one final hurdle today, and that is learning how long their son's killer will spend behind bars. Brett Peter Cowan is facing a mandatory life sentence, but what we don't know is what the minimum period will be for when he'll be eligible for parole, and that will be found out today. Elizabeth Tilley, Sky News at Queensland Police Headquarters. Brett Cowan showed no emotion as the sentence was handed down, staring straight ahead as he has done every day of this trial. In sentencing, Justice Rosalind Atkinson said she considered his history of violent child sex offences and the enormity of the crime for which he was now being punished. Justice Atkinson sentenced Daniel Morcombe's killer to life in prison with a non-parole period of 20 years. But she made it clear that she didn't think the 44-year-old should be released after that time because he was a convincing and habitual liar who had committed an horrific and disgraceful crime. That decision is out of her control and will be up to the parole board. Not everyone is satisfied with this outcome. Child protection advocate Hetty Johnson believes the sentence should have been tougher.
This man should never ever see the light of day again, and whatever happened today should have made sure that sealed it.
The prosecution had argued for a longer non-parole period than the 15-year minimum, saying Cowan had shown no remorse, was an ongoing threat to the community and had poor prospects of rehabilitation. Police in charge of this investigation have vigorously defended the methods used and the time taken to catch Daniel's killer. They say this was a complex case involving thousands of officers, 18,000 pieces of information and numerous suspects.
Certainly there will be those who will have different views about, what should have been followed up more quickly than something else, that yes, we should have taken out a warrant more early on a particular person or not. You have to put that in the context of the absolute complexity and flood of information that was just simply coming over the horizon at us in those early days.
Despite being here every day for the past 5 weeks, the Morcombes chose not to be present in the courtroom for the sentencing, citing personal reasons. Yesterday, after the verdicts of guilty were handed down, Bruce and Denise Morcombe gave a brief statement to the media, thanking everyone involved in the investigation and the public for their support, saying Daniel's legacy would live on through the Daniel Morcombe Foundation.
On behalf of our entire family, we would like to thank everybody for assisting us in the search for Daniel and for never forgetting Daniel. All the media, all the SES, all the police, all the public, the whole community. Thanks very much to everyone.
The Morcombes say this day still doesn't bring them closure after all these years, but they certainly believe the streets are now safer without Daniel's killer walking them. Elizabeth Tilley, Sky News, Brisbane. Life behind bars for Daniel Morcombe's killer, but he could be free again in 20 years. In sentencing Brett Cowan, the judge said she considered his history of violent child sex offences and the enormity of the crime for which he would now be punished. But she did make it clear that she didn't think the 44-year-old should be released after the 20-year non-parole period because he was a convincing and habitual liar who had committed an horrific and disgraceful crime. That decision is out of her control and will be up to the parole board. Not everyone is satisfied with this outcome. Child protection advocate Hetty Johnson says Queensland laws need to be changed to make it easier for judges to deliver even harsher sentences to pedophiles.
This man should never ever see the light of day again, and whatever happened today should have made sure that that sealed it.
Queensland's Attorney-General Jared Blay has raised the possibility of appealing the sentence, saying he's reviewing it and seeking advice from the Director of Public Prosecutions. Police in charge of this investigation have vigorously defended the methods used and the time taken to catch Daniel's killer, saying this was a complex case involving thousands of officers, 18,000 pieces of information and numerous suspects.
Certainly there will be those who will have different views about, what should have been followed up more quickly than something else, that yes, we should have taken out a warrant more early on a particular person or not. You have to put that in the context of the absolute complexity and flood of information that was just simply coming over the horizon at us in those early days.
Despite being present every day of this trial, the Morcombes chose not to be in the court while the sentencing was being delivered, citing personal reasons. Yesterday, after the verdicts of guilty were handed down, Bruce and Denise gave a brief statement to the media, thanking everyone involved in the investigation into Daniel's murder and the public for their ongoing support, saying Daniel's legacy will live on through the Daniel Morcombe Foundation. The Morcombes say this day still doesn't bring them closure after all these years, but they do believe the streets are now safer without Daniel's killer walking them. Elizabeth Tilley, Sky News at Brisbane Supreme Court. That's right, Jacinta. In sentencing Brett Cowan today, Justice Atkinson said that she considered his vast criminal history of child sex offences and the enormity of the crime for which he would now be punished. Justice Atkinson sentenced Brett Cowan to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 20 years, but she did make it clear that she didn't think he should be released after that time because he was a convincing and habitual liar who had committed a horrific and disgraceful crime. That decision will be left up to the parole board and will be out of her control. Now, not everyone is happy with this outcome. Child protection advocate Hetty Johnson said today that she thinks that the sentence should have been tougher. Take a listen.
She said so many things that were so poignant and so accurate, and I think, and also some of what she said resonates with the difficulty that the Attorney General is having with the judiciary in trying to get the courts to actually respond to this issue in a way that's strong and makes a difference without upsetting the historical, cultural, norms of the law. So I think there's a bit of work to go. I think that they can work together though, and hopefully we can get between the Attorney General and the courts that they can find something that works. But this man should never ever see the light of day again, and whatever happened today should have made sure that that sealed it.
The prosecution did argue for a non-parole period longer than the minimum 15 years. And they argued that because they said that Brett Cowan showed no remorse for what he had done and that he showed no sign of being able to be rehabilitated. Now, Bruce and Denise Morcombe and their children, Dean and Bradley, chose not to be present in the courtroom for the sentencing today. They cited personal reasons, but they have been here every single day of this trial up until now. Yesterday they did give a brief statement to the media after the verdict was handed down, thanking the officers involved in this lengthy investigation and also the public for their ongoing support. The Morcombes, while that they say that this day doesn't bring them closure, they do believe that the streets are now safer without Daniel's killer walking them. Vanessa?
Thanks, Liz.
Good evening, Jacinta. We heard some very powerful remarks from Justice Rosalind Atkinson today and handing down that sentence of life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 20 years to Brett Cowan. In sentencing, she said that she had considered his history of violent child sex offences and the enormity of the crime for which he would now be punished. And she did make it clear that she didn't think the 44-year-old should be released after that 20-year period because he was a compulsive and habitual liar who had committed an horrific and disgraceful crime. But that's not her decision to make. It is out of her parole and will be up to out of her control rather, and will be up to the parole board. Not everyone is happy with the sentencing. Queensland's Attorney General Jared Blay has this afternoon said that he will be possibly seeking to appeal the sentence. He's at the moment reviewing it and speaking with the Director of Public Prosecutions to see what action they might take. And of course the Queensland Government has been very harsh in terms of their treatment of child sex offenders and have looked to introduce new laws just in the past 12 months. Child protection advocate Hetty Johnson also believes the sentence could have been tougher. Have a listen to what she had to say this afternoon.
She said so many things that were so poignant and so accurate, you know. And I think, and also some of what she said resonates with the difficulty that the Attorney General is having with the judiciary in trying to get the courts to actually respond to this issue in a way that's strong and makes a difference without upsetting the historical, cultural, norms of the law. So I think there's a bit of work to go. I think that they can work together though, and hopefully we can get between the Attorney General and the courts that they can find something that works. But this man should never ever see the light of day again, and whatever happened today should have made sure that sealed it.
Bruce and Denise Morcombe, nor their two remaining children, Bradley and Dean, were present in court this afternoon for the sentencing. They chose not to. They chose instead to attend a fundraiser. But they have been here, of course, every day of this trial up until now. And they did give a brief statement yesterday after the verdict, thanking all the officers involved in the investigation and the public support they have received. And this has been a case that has attracted such a huge amount of attention. And tonight from 6:30 local time here in Brisbane, the iconic Story Bridge will be lit up red in memory of Daniel.
And our reporter Liz Tilley joins us now from the Supreme Court. She was in court for this sentencing. Liz, what did we hear in court in the past few minutes?
Well, Vanessa, as you mentioned, in sentencing, Justice Rosalind Atkinson did sentence Brett Peter Cowan to life imprisonment for murder with eligibility for parole after a minimum of 20 years. And as you said, she did say that she didn't think he should be allowed to be eligible for parole after those 20 years, but that will be up to the parole board. Now, the Morcombes decided not to be in court for personal reasons for this verdict, but there were some homicide detectives involved in this investigation there as well. And Brett Cowan himself, there was no reaction, as we've seen the whole time during this trial. He was emotionless when this was said to him in the sentencing. Now, I'll just go through some of the remarks that Justice Atkinson also said during this sentencing. She described his crimes as entirely abhorrent behaviour. chilling and disgraceful. She said that he was an opportunistic offender, which he had also said in his own words, that he saw Daniel Morcombe waiting for the bus, that he knew that that bus had broken down, and that he saw an opportunity, and he was an opportunistic offender waiting for that opportunity. She said that he killed Daniel Morcombe because he didn't want to get caught. She said that he killed him intentionally. She said everything about what you did to this child is horrific and disgraceful. That was a particularly powerful comment made by Justice Atkinson in handing down that sentence to Brett Cowan just moments ago. She also said that he's shown no remorse throughout the course of the investigation and this trial. Not once has he shown any remorse to police officers or to the judge herself. She also said that he was a convincing, plausible and adaptable liar, and that he was prepared to lie in order to advance himself at any opportunity. She said that the video recorded confession by undercover police that was set up, that operation that spanned over months in 2011 to try to catch him. In relation to that, she said that operation shows that you are not quite as smart as you thought you were. And she said that while maintaining eye contact with him the whole time, and that was just before she handed down the exact sentence, and he didn't flinch, I can tell you, Vanessa, during that entire time. It went for probably about 10 minutes of Justice Atkinson actually handing down that sentence and going through a little bit of his criminal history, but particularly about his demeanour and about his crimes, and just describing how chilling and horrific, in her words, she thought they were. Now, she also said that she thought the purpose of her sentence was to punish him, to deter others from committing similar crimes, and to be able to protect the Queensland community. She felt that that was the purpose of her role in handing down this sentence, and she thought that given his vast criminal history, which does include horrific and violent child sex offences, one that was committed in 1987 involving a 7-year-old boy, which he lured into a toilet in Brisbane and then molested him, and then another which was described as eerily similar to the Daniel Morcombe case, and that was in 1993 involving a 6-year-old boy. Of course, these crimes have now come out since the verdict was handed down yesterday afternoon, but she made mention of them again today in that sentence, saying that they did play a part in her making her decision of just how long he should remain behind bars today. She said that given his criminal history and the fact that he showed no remorse, she decided to give him life in prison for murder and a minimum parole period of 20 years, but noting that she didn't think that he should get out after 20 years. Now, in terms of the other two charges that he faced, indecent dealing with a child and interference with a corpse, he was sentenced to 3.5 years imprisonment for count 2, indecent dealing with a child, and 2 years for count 3, interference with a corpse. But they are to be served concurrently with the life sentence. So I can tell you now that was just handed down just moments ago in the courtroom here at Brisbane Supreme Court. The Morcombes chose not to be present for that for personal reasons, according to the Crown Prosecutor Michael Byrne. But there was another packed gallery in there with the people very interested to hear this sentence.
Liz, strong words from the Supreme Court Justice Rosalind Atkinson, but I guess not surprising given that jurors learned only yesterday of Brett Peter Cowan's previous convictions.
Well, that's right. I mean, Justice Atkinson was quite obviously, I suppose, affected by this case in the words that she spoke. You could tell in her face and in just simply the emotion and the power that came in some of those remarks. And his criminal history was laid bare yesterday after that. All the 3 verdicts of guilty were handed down for all 3 of those charges, and they are quite shocking in terms of the detail and the gravity of the crimes that he committed, particularly that one in 1993 when he was jailed for 7 years but was out on parole in 1998, so just 4 years after he was jailed in 1994 for that crime. And the questions are being asked now as to why he was back on the streets then and able to offend again when he saw his next victim, which was Daniel Morcombe in 2003. And yes, as I touched on, that crime was particularly horrific, and she went into that again today, just how horrific and disgraceful that crime was. It occurred in Darwin at a caravan park where he was living in 1993. He coerced a 6-year-old boy into following him into bushland near that caravan park, and on a rusted old car he sexually molested him so violently that he ended up with quite horrific injuries, which included a punctured and collapsed lung, serious cuts and head injuries, and he ended up dazed and confused and found wandering on the highway, the Stewart Highway, near where a petrol station was. I'm just going to... We've got Hetty Johnson from Bravehearts about to make a little bit of a statement. We might just see what she has to say.
Well, life, I heard life and I thought that'll do me. As long as he stays there and he just never ever gets released again, I think everybody will be happy.
It is at the discretion of the judge, the non-parole period.
Yeah.
Were you surprised at 20 years?
Well, I don't know enough about that to sort of make it, but I've understood since that could have been higher. I would expect that in a case like this, particularly, that would be as high as it possibly could be. Just if there is such a thing as a deterrence for sex offenders, I don't really think that they go into a defence thinking, plotting it all out. Particularly him is by his own admission opportunistic.
What words are stuck in your mind from Justice Atkinson's sentence?
Life. She said so many things that were so poignant and so accurate, and I think, and also some of what she said resonates with the difficulty that the Attorney General is having with the judiciary in trying to get the courts to actually respond to this issue in a way that's strong and makes a difference without upsetting the historical, cultural, norms of the law. So I think there's a bit of work to go. I think that they can work together though, and hopefully we can get between the Attorney General and the courts that they can find something that works. But this man should never ever see the light of day again, and whatever happened today should have made sure that sealed it.
So do you think the sentence is tough enough?
Well, I would have liked to have seen him just life, 50 years, 100 years non-parole, just never let him out.
What do you think the community can take away from the judge's sentencing remarks?
Well, I think the judge, she probably just reflected what we're all feeling anyway, and what's been said by others too. So, I don't know what else she could say to that. I wish it had been a little bit stronger, only because I think we all feel that. Maybe that's an emotional time, I don't know. But yeah, look, she said life. She gave him maximum for the other things. I don't think in this environment that we have at the moment with the legal system that we could have expected any more than that.
What do you think about the Morcombes not coming today?
You know what, I'm exhausted and I'm just on the outside of this, so I can't even begin to imagine how they must be feeling today. They must be just totally no energy. We all have to try to remember what they've gone through. I'd be shocked if they were here today,
Do you have the message if they're watching?
Just that, we've got our arms wrapped around them.
So there you go. That was Hetty Johnson from Bravehearts, who's been a very strong advocate for child protection, saying that she thinks that Brett Cowan should never see the light of day, and that she thought that the sentence perhaps could have been tougher in terms of that minimum 20-year parole eligibility period. I'm sure she's not alone, perhaps, in thinking that. We are probably going to hear more of that come out once more people learn of this sentence. Basically talking also about the impact on the community that this case has had. It has, of course, raised so much awareness about child safety, and Denise and Bruce Morcombe have just been tireless advocates of that.
Let me bring Liz Tilley in once again outside the Queensland Supreme Court. Liz, we touched on this briefly earlier. Was there any reaction from Brett Peter Cowan when this sentence was handed out?
No, there wasn't, Vanessa. He was ordered to stand in the dock by Justice Atkinson. And as I said, it took her a good, at least more than 5 minutes anyway, to read through his history and read her remarks to him. And often, she read from a statement, but often, raising to look him in the eye during it. And I was sitting behind him in the front row of the public gallery and just slightly to the side of him, and I was watching him quite intently to see whether there would be any reaction. But no, I can honestly say to you, he just stood looking straight ahead the entire time, and he has remained devoid of emotion throughout this entire trial, which has run now for almost 5 weeks. He's been sitting there in the dock. He's always just looked straight ahead. There has been no expression on his face. It's been quite incredible, really, to see that. He did choose not to give evidence, to take the stand, and that was, I guess, could have been seen by many as a reason as to why, the fact he didn't show that remorse, that he didn't want to get up and say anything. Of course, Justice Atkinson to the jury said not to consider it as an admission of guilt, the fact that he didn't give evidence, but it is worth noting that he chose not to. And yesterday, when that verdict was handed down, Justice Atkinson actually said to him, "Do you have anything to say?" And he said no. So that is simply all we've heard from him throughout the entire course of this trial. No reaction. And in stark contrast has been the emotions that we have seen from members of the public gallery, which range from a very large contingent of media, of course, as well as homicide detectives, many of those that were involved in this lengthy investigation. And this morning, Commissioner Ian Stewart said that there would have been thousands of police officers involved. He couldn't say an exact number, but many of them have been there throughout these final days of the trial, but also just members of the community who have followed this case since 2003, since December 7, when Daniel disappeared. Many that I've spoken to who've said that they don't know the Morcombes at all, but they've always felt like they've had a connection with them. They've had sons or daughters themselves around Daniel's age, and they've just felt so connected to this case that they've wanted to be there to share this outcome with the Morcombes. And many, even one woman said that she lives in Toowoomba and she's got up at 3 a.m. every morning, every day of this trial, to travel here, to be able to see this. So quite incredible. And look, yesterday we just saw tears flowing, particularly when Bruce and Denise Morcombe's impact statements were read to the court, and there were some incredibly moving and powerful words there. So, yeah, it's been quite extraordinary here in court, but the reaction from Brett Cowan, really devoid of emotion, Vanessa.
Liz, we might just